नमस्कार, यो अन्तर्वार्ता अनि म अरुणदेव जोशी। विगत लामो समयको द्वन्द्वपछि नेपालमा 2063 मङ्सिर 5 गते वृहत शान्ति सम्झौता भएको अहिले 13 वर्ष पुगिसकेको छ। त्यसबीच दुई पटक संविधान सभाको निर्वाचन भएको छ, 2064 र 2070 मा, र 2072 मा नेपालले नयाँ संविधान पनि पाइसकेको छ। त्यसयता स्थानीय निर्वाचनदेखि लिएर संघीय निर्वाचन पनि भयो 2074 मा, र अहिले हामी अर्को निर्वाचनको तयारीमा छौं। यसबीच पनि शान्ति सम्झौताका कतिपय कार्यहरू अझ पूरा नभइसकेका कुराहरू आइरहेका छन्। भर्खरै संसदमा सत्य निरूपण तथा मेलमिलाप आयोगको विधेयक पारित हुन सकेन। यिनै सन्दर्भमा विभिन्न देशहरूले यस्तै स्थिति विगतमा पनि भोगेका थिए। विगतमा विभिन्न देशहरूले यस्ता स्थितिबाट कसरी आफूलाई अगाडि ल्याएर त्यहाँ त्यस्ता स्थितिहरूबाट कसरी चाहिँ त्यस्ता स्थितिको समाधान भेटे, यस्ता अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय उदाहरणहरू प्रशस्त छन्। आज हामी यस्तै अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय उदाहरणको कुरा गर्छौं। आज हामीसँग एकजना विदेशी पाहुना हुनुहुन्छ। आज हामीसँग हुनुहुन्छ प्रोफेसर क्लारा स्यान्डोभल। She is a professor of University of Human Rights Law at the University of Essex, and she is a director of program at Global Survivor Fund. She had experience with such issues of truth and reconciliation in Latin America and other part of the world as well. We are welcoming here Miss Clara. Namaste, Clara.
Namaste, Anur. Pleasure to be here.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. I'm very happy to be in this country.
So you are loving this country?
Absolutely. I see the potential, amazing potential to move peace forward.
So how long you have been here, this trip?
4 days,
Yes.
but 4 intensive days of meetings with people from different sectors that have helped me to understand the process that you are currently undergoing, the challenges that you have, but also the opportunities.
It is your first time in Nepal, right?
Yes, it is. It is.
So what was the real purpose of you coming to Nepal this time?
I do a lot of work on transitional justice, and particularly in the area of the right to reparation. And massive debt in Nepal is precisely to respond to that right, reparation. Victims of the armed conflict have a right to reparation, and there is too much to be done in that area, as well as in relation to justice, in relation to truth, and of course guarantees of non-repetition. So I came here to understand what are the opportunities to provide reparations, and in particular reparations for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence.
Okay.
I was mentioning to you before that another area where there is a massive gap is in relation to survivors of conflict-related sexual violence.
Sexual violences. Okay, the peace process, you know that comprehensive peace process, it has been since 2006, it has been in 2016. Since then, it's already 13 years. And still we say the peace and reconciliation process is on the way, and even this comprehensive peace process is not completed yet. The provisions, lots of provisions in the provisions we agreed upon the peace and this peace process has to be fulfilled, and that's one is the reconciliation process. So what do you have find so far? How much Nepal has achieved? It's in right direction, or we have to work a lot?
I think that a lesson we've learned from other contexts around the world is that transitions don't happen from one day to the next. Achieving a peace agreement like the one that you were able to put in place, that is a really comprehensive peace agreement, is not the end, but the beginning of a transition. You are grappling at the moment with the complexities of coming to terms with justice, reparation, truth, and guarantees of non-repetition. I personally believe that there are various missing factors here, but one that has absolutely drawn my attention is the lack of participation in the transitional justice process of victims.
Okay.
And of civil society organizations. I think that if you don't bring them to the table to have a voice, to express their views, to express their concerns, the transition will not be able to be unlocked. So I think that's one of the areas where if you shift that, if you give power to victims, I think you would be able to really move the transition forward.
Even the law, there is a amendment for this Peace and Reconciliation Act over here, and it was due in the Parliament this time, but it couldn't happen. Parliament already this parliament has already expired now, right? So there will be a new election. But why do you think this process is so much lingering over here? According to your this studies, what you have find the real thing, what is lacking behind for us to go forward with this constitution process?
I think all the parties that are needed around the table to come to terms with the legacy of mass atrocities have not sat down together. And again, I note the absence of victims' voices and the absence of a united civil society, as well as the former parties of the conflict, right? Here there was not a winner. Here you got all parties to agree on a peace settlement. And that brings with it the complications of how are we going to, for example, deal with justice? How far I am happy to go in this process, no? And I think we need to be able to unlock the conversation by listening to victims, but by also giving something, no? So I think we need to create a system of incentives for people to come forward, for the perpetrators of those atrocities to say, okay, I am ready to, for example, be punished, but not the traditional punishment. If, I am happy to give, for example, the location of the disappeared. I'm happy, what are they going to give in exchange for? I think we need strong conditions here in terms of what they are going to contribute to. And those conditions need to come from victims. Victims need to tell us what they want, how they want it. And I think perpetrators need to listen to them. And I think we need also the political will, no? We need a government, both at the national level, because this is a federal state, but also in the provinces that are ready to back up that. It's not easy. It's not easy. I come from Colombia, and in Colombia we have had a similar process, and we were able to put in place a peace agreement that took us various years to achieve. And the transition has happened also for many years, not only since 2016. But the lesson learned is that if you create spaces for participation, if victims are able to express themselves and say what they want and what they need, and they are listened to, and the perpetrators are also able to express themselves, as well as the other stakeholders, it is easier to have a dialogical framework that allows for solutions, to seize opportunities. And that's what I'm not seeing here. I see some fronts trying to bring some potential opportunities to the table, but not fully backed up by everyone. And here you need a consensus. Transitional justice in a country like Nepal, where you have not been able to defeat one another in a conflict, requires consensus. Consensus.
But lots of time people think it has take a lots of time, and you are saying it's a time consuming, it's take lots of time. That from 21 November 2016 since peace accord, it has been 13 years. And do you feel the 13 years it hasn't been so much long time, the process has to be still go on? It's not much long time this kind of thing happens?
I think it's normal for transitions. This idea that the transition lasts 5 years, in my view, is wrong. We can see it around the world.
Yes.
Countries like, for example, Argentina or Chile, that began their transitions in the 80s, are still transitioning today. That's my particular reading of those contexts. In other countries like Colombia, an armed conflict, in my view, we began the transition. Some say that in 2005, in my particular view, we started even in the 1990s. So this has taken time. So the transition is not accomplished in 5 years. But you need key elements, key conditions. I often refer to this idea of an ecosystem. The transition is not going to be made by one president or by parliament, or is made by different stakeholders that decide to get together and unlock discussions about truth, justice, reparation, and non-recurrence.
We have over here made the Peace and Reconciliation Commission as well, but you have you have heard right now there's no anybody over there, no in the commission, not any commissioner, not chief commissioner, not any commissioner over there. It's stopped somewhere. And like I said before, this act of amendment couldn't happen this time also. And lots of time over here people see it like this process like giving amnesty to everybody. Is it like that?
I think we need to be careful with the topic of amnesties. Of course, blanket amnesties are not allowed under international law, and Nepal is bound by international treaties like the ICCPR that clearly indicate that that is not a possibility. But there are other options, and that's when I refer to conditionality. And I think we are learning interesting lessons from the world about how it is possible to achieve justice, reparation, truth, and non-recurrence when it comes down to how do you punish perpetrators. And the case of Colombia, I think, is interesting in relation to this. We have to see if it works. We are testing it
in Colombia.
But the interesting thing about the Colombian case is that a particular regime was put in place to investigate. There are investigations and very careful investigations of macro cases that would allow the imposition of a particular type of penalty called sanción propia, special sanctions to the most responsible, that is not a deprivation of liberty. So it's not imprisonment, but it is restrictive of liberty, and it is an effective sanction. So it's not that it's symbolic. No, there is an effective sanction that constitutes, the objective of it is to put perpetrators to carry out work, activities in particular places in a restorative framework, listening to victims about what they want. So they will do, in a way, what collectively they will decide that in a particular community will need.
Okay.
Particular community, imagine Province 5 here, that was incredibly impacted by conflict.
Karnataka,
yes,
Karnataka,
exactly.
yeah.
So imagine then perpetrators that what can they do there to reconstruct the social texture of the society? What can they do there? And I think victims have something to say about that. No, here there is poverty, there is exclusion. What can we do to respond to that, as well as to the terrible other legacy of mass atrocities, enforced disappearances, conflict-related sexual violence, arbitrary killings, torture, etc., that have taken place here. So I think there are ways to try to find not a compromise. I wouldn't call it a compromise, because this is still very much in line with international law, but to create frameworks that try to bring a response to justice, because there you will be investigating and you will be punishing. There is nothing under international law that says to you that the only way you can punish a perpetrator is with imprisonment of 100 years. No. Punishment is an obligation under international law, and you can say...
But the kind of punishment could be different.
Could be different. Now, what can you do to... How to frame that punishment in Nepal, I think, is a big question. My point is, you need to condition it.
Victims should also accept the punishment given to the perpetrator, right?
Of course, victims want justice, and they should be punished. But they also have to contribute to other things. The perpetrators, they have to contribute to the truth. They have to contribute to the reparation, right? So if we can create a balance between these rights through the punishment, so that the punishment becomes also a reparatory act, so that through the sanction itself you are also telling the truth, I think we are contributing to the fulfillment of various rights. So I think it's very important to consider how to move forward. We need to unlock the problem here, and I think that needs to really reflect carefully about how to frame the punishment here for the perpetrators. Again, you cannot just leave them out in terms of just amnesty. No, amnesties are not allowed under international law.
So even
the
recent act that was tabled in the parliament, that was not passed by this parliament, maybe it will go to the next parliament. There are lots of criticism that there are lots of non-amnestiable cases, serious cases, has been put under the clauses of an amnesty, except the rape cases, except the rape. What do you feel? What kind of case, in what kind of cases there shouldn't be amnesty? At least there should be some kind of conviction.
There is a duty to investigate with due diligence any human rights violations. That is a clear international obligation that binds Nepal. So diligent investigations have to happen, and they have to happen for all crimes, for enforced disappearances, for arbitrary killings, for torture, for conflict-related sexual violence, understood broadly not only as rape. There are other forms of conflict-related sexual violence like forced abortion, forced sterilization, forced motherhood, sexual slavery, and there are other crimes like displacement and the like. So all of them need to be investigated with due diligence. So amnesties are not allowed. A blanket amnesty like the ones that we had in countries like Peru, Guatemala, Argentina, Chile are illegal under international law. You cannot have an amnesty.
Didn't work as well.
Yeah, no. You cannot have an amnesty. And what we've seen in countries like those that had amnesty laws in place is that they had to reverse them. You know, if Nepal today approves, say, they would have approved 2 days ago the law in parliament, I tell you, you will have not been able to get away with murder in a way, because in 10 years, when civil society is even stronger and victims gain their voice, they are going to come up very strongly to say, this has to be undone, and international bodies are going to tell you this needs to be undone. And that was the case of Argentina. They had to, the Supreme Court in Argentina declared unconstitutional the amnesty laws. And we had the same situation in other countries of the Americas. Peru, the Inter-American Court saying in a key case they are against the American Convention on Human Rights. So plenty of precedents showing us that blanket amnesties are not allowed under international law. So you will have to think more creatively about what to do, because an amnesty is not an option. So the option is, how do we investigate with feasibility? Because you also need to remember, I think this is a difference between the Nepalese case and other cases like Colombia. In Nepal, when I look at the amount of violations that were committed, well, the numbers are high, of course, and they were systematic, etc. But we might be talking about, I'm giving just an approximate number, 100,000 victims, or a bit more. In Colombia, we have 9 million. So dealing with massivity complicates things. And I think here you have an opportunity, because to respond to this is much more feasible from a criminal perspective, from a reparation perspective, from a truth perspective. So you have an opportunity there.
So there should be rigorous investigation about the cruel murder after torture, rape, enforced disappearances, and inhuman and cruel tortures like that things.
Totally.
So both you have to take to both parties and make them realize or make them understand them. So
no, but also that their legitimacy now as people that don't want to be perpetrators anymore, but that want to be representing the people, you know, because you have them in power, no, at different times. So these are the people that are representing you. So they owe something to society too. And is that example of, yes, the rules are for everyone. There is a rule that says that we need to be investigated for what we did, and we are going to contribute to that process. So it's also about the legitimacy of the system, no? You cannot have a system that is created or founded on...
So you think this amendment that was tabled in the parliament just recently, but it didn't pass, was not sufficient this time?
I think there are norms, there are parts there that are good. For example, on reparation, finally we had a right to reparation there. But there are parts of it, like in relation to amnesties, that are very problematic from an international law perspective, to say the least. How do I see that it was not approved? I see it as an opportunity too. I wish that more discussion would have happened, but I see it as an opportunity for Nepal now to come together, make sure that the parts that were problematic are fixed, and even make a stronger framework that brings the voices of victims to the table too. I think this is also an opportunity to give participation to victims.
This commission, there were lots of big things over there. They came over there, they raised the issues, they raised the conscience, and there are lots of process over there. And even though about this act was not there, proper act was not there, the process was not complete. Do you think that if this act had been passed this time, something would have happened about that? We have gone forward, like the situation is stalemate right now.
It's complicated because on the one hand, of course, you have now the TRC and the Commission on Enforced Disappearances in a limbo. That's how I see it.
Yeah,
they cannot do their job, and those are two very important pieces of work.
there is no functional body over there.
Exactly. So limbo, and we need to trigger truth, trigger all work about the disappeared. So it's a limbo. But as I said, if this situation is going to allow you to really strengthen the framework, then it was an opportunity. If you are going to continue lingering this process, I think is.
But here it seems like a lot of lingering process is going on. Even this 5 years of this parliament, nothing happened about this Truth and Reconciliation Commission. In the later half, in the end of the parliament, they wanted to table it and pass it, but it couldn't happen as well. So this lingering is going on, right? And there, you said like it takes a long time, but you have mentioned also this 5 years, last 5 years, it has done nothing about this.
Yeah, because the conditions, the ecosystem has not been there. The political will from the various sectors that are needed has not been there. And again, the voices of survivors have not been part of it. I tell you, in Colombia, for many years, we couldn't unlock the process. We were completely polarized. There was no way to move forward. And only when you created a truly participatory process. Victims participated in the making of the peace agreement. From there, participation began. They brought to Havana, through the conversations, different stakeholders too. And the process then began to unfold with participation, through participation. Very complex to achieve, but was done. And I think that was what allowed this to move forward, despite how polarized my own country is.
Yeah, one of the main party of this peace agreement, CPN Maoist chairman Pushpa Kamal Das Prachanda has said that this political urges and biasness towards the bill. Yes, there is lots of political bias towards the bill, and it is not being like he just said after that couldn't amend it a few days back. So, do you see any political biasness over here during your studies about the
Yes, you always see this. There are different sides in conflicts. Not only within the ones that are the actors of the conflict, but within society at large. Again, how do you unlock that? Well, with strong political movements. And here is where victims and civil society can make a difference. I want to see here in Nepal the civil society and the victims making accountable those who are representing them in parliament. Yes, accountability. What did you do? Why didn't you move forward the TJ process? Now the elections are coming up here. This is the moment to say, okay, you want to be elected? What are you going to give us in terms of peace? What is your commitment to peace?
Always this kind of issue has made election issues in like our country. Just made an election issue, and this kept prolonging for the next election. It could be always the issues. So this kind of things also happening.
But this has happened in many other parts of the world. But I think a strong pressure when you see that your legitimacy, that your power can be taken away from you because you are failing those, you need to respond.
Who used to build? Who has to build the strong pressure? The civil society, the government, or this signing parties of the peace agreement?
I think all. But here, my perception, I might be wrong, but my perception is that there is a key missing block to unlock this, and is civil society and victims. I don't hear their voices, or I hear them not very articulated always. And I think we need to unlock that. We need to give them a space. I think that if they can come out and call for accountability very strongly, I think that might help. I am confident actually that it will help.
Yeah, but in Nepal situation, it's seen that one party, like even in civil society, they are also divided. They also one of the section of the civil society is always against this this rebellion parties which had come to the peace agreement, and they always want them to be not in the they don't want to be in the mainstream, and they are always pressuring them, and always they are actually blamed to doing like that. So have you seen like this kind of situation?
Yes.
Have you feel that like that?
Is you know, as I said, transitions take time, and they take time because the political will is not always there to move them forward. No, so how do you unlock that? How can we change the articulation of factors, of conditions that are you know, spoiling the happening of the transition? And that's different actors. Again, other actors that can play a key role here, the international community. Other
So
states.
these all kinds of actors have to sit together, right? And they are not sitting right now.
No,
they
they are
didn't
not.
want to sit with one another.
No,
Some
no,
actors
no,
are
no.
there.
No. And I think that was the key success in Colombia, to be able to put a key guerrilla in conversation with the government, or to put the paramilitary groups in conversation with the government, with a quid pro quo, in a way, I give you, you give me. What I, you know, and the acceptance that this is only going to unlock if you give something. You cannot win it all. Yes? And you cannot win to be free and to be in power when there is a legacy of mass atrocities that you need to reckon with. So we need to take responsibility for what happened, and give something to those that were harmed by it. And that's justice, that's truth, and that is reparation. And that can happen while at the same time giving something to the perpetrators. Spaces for restorative justice. Okay, we are going to pardon you not as an amnesty, but we will allow you to be, to reconcile with your society, but be part of the justice process, be part of the truth. Tell us the truth. Tell us where the disappeared are. You know, here there is a massive debt, finding the bodies of the disappeared. That, I tell you, that will be incredibly significant, not only as a measure of justice, as a measure of truth, but also as reparation. I think that's key.
But some parties, like, they are always asserting one party of the conflict, that they will take them to the court of Hague. They have said they should have been trial in the court of Hague. So and the other parties always frightened, you can say, or always reacting to talk to them. Like, this kind of parties which want to make them to go to the court of Hague, and other to make reconciliation over here only. They are always in the conflict over here. Do you see it?
Yes, they will always, again, in Colombia, for example, the threat of the ICC allowed also the parties to go to the table. But the threat of the ICC was very real in Colombia.
Very real or rare?
Real.
Okay.
I mean, it could have, well, indeed, the ICC closed just last December a preliminary investigation in relation to Colombia. So it was possible.
But our investigation is not still there in ICC.
Yeah, exactly. So for you, how much of a, you can have the carrot and the stick. So I'll give you the carrot. Okay, maybe I will have more lenient sanctions. This is the carrot. Come here, lenient sanctions. And this is the stick. So what's the stick here? What is the stick here? Well, the stick, in my view, is that if you don't contribute now, you are going to be prosecuted by the ordinary system, because you still have a criminal system that is working, and I don't understand why that system is not prosecuting them. It should be. There is an obligation to investigate. The transition can help for that ordinary system. If there is an institutional setup created within a transitional justice framework, then that ordinary system is not going to do it. We accept that it's going to be done in a different way, but still there will be justice. Yes? So that's to me is the incentive. We are not going to be then sentenced to, I don't know how many years of imprisonment under the ordinary system. Yes? But we will come to an agreement about what we will accept because we did wrong. Yes. So there needs to be a sanction, and an effective sanction. But we are also going to contribute to truth, and we are also going to contribute to reparation. We might have a more lenient sanction. Yes, but you are not going to get away with murder. That cannot be the message.
But there could be always difference about that. Two different countries conflicting, two different countries warring each other, and the constitution process in that kind of situation, and within the country, the mass uprising armed mass uprising, this could be different. Like lots of people have gone with weapons. They like they say, they for the revolution, they for the change, and it was I would say like that it was not somebody who just came one day and make an army and went to fight with the government and fight with the other party, but lots of people, they really want actually to change of the society, change of the power, change of the thing. And in this kind of situation, there is something to deal differently for this kind of situation that
No,
within the
yeah.
country, it is a lots of political thing, or lots of people, they feel like they are depressed, they are deprived, and they wanted power, they wanted to be a privileged one, so
Yeah,
they
no,
fought for
I
that.
don't think that will justify the commission of crimes under international law. I don't think you can tell the mother of a disappeared person or a woman who has been subjected to sexual violence,
Yeah.
I actually justify what I did because I had a political intention to make this country a more equal country. I don't think you can say that. It doesn't stand. You want social justice, do it the right way. Participate in politics as you are doing now. Work hard to make this society equal, but don't go and kill, don't go and torture, don't go and disappear, don't go and rape. No, I don't think, legally speaking, you cannot stand on that. But also there are under international law, there is no way to remove responsibility from a perpetrator because of the political claim. No, not even an amnesty. No, it's
Yes,
not
but
possible.
but there's always a clause about this, that enhancing spirit of the mutual good faith. Yeah, mutual good faith and tolerance in the society. So in this kind of situation, there are different parties, they have different views, and they have for the peace process, they have different approaches. But you have to come to something to take country forward. You cannot just keep lingering over somewhere like this happening in Nepal situation. And for this enhancing spirit of the mutual good faith and the tolerance in the society, so there could be some kind of I mean to say some kind of that forgiving from the each side, or these kind of things.
No, but to forgive without justice, I personally, the experiences around the world show us that is not possible. In countries like Argentina or Chile that opted for the truth to begin with without justice, what we've seen is that they have had to have justice. Yes, the victims came with everything they had. They united, they worked day and night to secure justice. I've been sitting at the trials in Argentina, for example, and I've seen the grandmothers sitting at the trials 30 years later to deal with the disappearances of their kids. Yes, so I know what is a victim that has the power to tell that what happened was wrong. So I don't think you would be able to say, I forgive you. I give you the truth and I forgive you. No. It will always haunt you. It will always haunt you.
Yeah.
It will come back. It will continue lingering the process. So why not to rather come to terms with it? Why not to sit down all together? Why not to listen to victims? And why not to be ready to make a contribution, not only because of a legal norm, but because of moral and political reasons. You cannot build a society over crimes. You build a society over common values, shared values that everyone understands and shares. Yes? And that should be, for example, respect to the rule of law, respect to rights, respect to individuals. No? Every individual deserves to be respected here, including victims. No? So I think it's a balancing exercise, but you cannot just simply say, let's forgive and forget.
But sometimes it happens like that. It's not a real victim, but somebody others who has different thought or different intention, different interest. They use these things for their particular interest. So this kind of things also happen. right?
But I don't understand. Where would you like?
Actually, some interest groups, like
Yes.
this peace process is happening with different parties who have been involved, who have been victims, who have been perpetrators. But apart from that, other actors who has their interest, who want to solve their interest, use both these parties, and they didn't want this kind of peace process to come to the conclusion. This kind of things are happening, and in Nepal also it is blamed to some party. It is blamed that this kind of thing happening. Have you any experience about this thing?
Yes, the spoilers. I mean,
Yeah.
there are different spoilers, as well as people that would like things to happen in a particular way because they will benefit it from it. I mean, interests are at stake in all transitions. But again, the question is how much each of the actors is ready to give, and how much are you going to receive? How do we create that balance? Because this is going to be a quid
So
pro quo.
there is always a provocation of the one actor for the interest. So this provocation is always hampering this process which have moved forward.
Yeah, I think to me, something that I have learned from the Colombian experience is a magic word, and it's incentive. What are the incentives we can put on the table that are going to bring actors together? What is the incentive for the Maoists, for example? What is the incentive? And yes, they might say, we don't want any punishment. Well, you need also to draw lines, no? I might think about lenient punishment, different to imprisonment, but with certain conditions. So the conditions have to be also high, no? Truth, reparation, as I say, is not only about seeing each element of transitional justice as a compartmentalized element, and the discussion cannot be only about justice. And let me say this, a gap I see here is everyone talking about the justice component, but forgetting about the others. No? So guarantees of non-recurrence are key. If we don't address the root causes that allow the conflict in this country, it is going to re-emerge. Yes, and I think you've taken some interesting measures. For example, your new constitution, the 2015 constitution, I was reading it. It's a fascinating document that sets a beautiful road, a beautiful vision for this country. And that's the kind of document that can unite, actors, including victims. The way, for example, victims are included there, those most marginalized, women, Dalits, and others, is fascinating. So opportunities. The other area where you have a gap is the right to reparation. Here, everyone talks about interim relief and assistance. No, victims have a right to reparation. And we have a debt with that right here. And I think this is the moment to act on that. No?
So seeing the Nepal situation, since we have gone some forward, we have gone some way, we have passed some way, and even the peace and reconciliation process have moved forward. Seeing in the situation right now where it has been, and it's stalemate right now. So what do you suggest? What we have to do now?
I think that we need to create the spaces for dialogue among actors. And I think actors, I might make this call to actors.
Commission is as one of the places for the dialogue.
Yeah, could be, but there are other, spaces for dialogue. So my call is for everyone to be ready to give something and be ready to accept something. So we need to create the spaces for dialogue, and we need to involve victims. Sorry to be so strong on that point, but it's key. It's key. Without them, the process will be weak and will lack legitimacy, even if you're able to unlock it. So it's really key to have all actors together.
But sometimes you said victim in Nepal, when you say victim, it's always look as like this victims from the Maoist side, but there are always victims from the government side as well.
Both sides.
So
this
term has to be realized in Nepalese concept.
All are victims.
Yes, all are victims.
Victims who suffer enforced disappearance, regardless of whether they were committed by the government or by the Maoists, are victims, and they deserve truth, justice, and reparation. So, I'm talking here as a lawyer as much as a citizen, no, that needs to give the rights to whom they belong, and you are a victim. There are even victims, and this could be an incredibly complex issue here, and it's what we call complex victimhood. There are members of the Maoist, for example, or members of the government, of the military, etc., who were victims at the same time that they were perpetrators. How are you going to reckon with that? What does that mean in terms of justice, truth, and reparation? And this is an area that many countries around the world don't know how to grapple with because it's complex. Of course, the last that you want to recognize as a victim is a member of the Maoist or a member of the government, depending on where you see things from. But they are victims. According to international law, if certain elements are fulfilled, they are victims. If they suffered, torture, rape, etc., they are victims, and they are entitled to reparation as much as justice and truth.
Yeah, and there are lots of that acts like that. They are not forgivable. Like you say, like you were mentioning about the sexual violences also during this conflict time, right? You have written a book or you have written a paper about representation of conflict-related sexual violence for the UN General Secretary, right?
Yes. I think a key issue in this country, look, you had an interim relief program that excluded victims of torture and conflict-related sexual violence. So completely quiet there. So victims of conflict-related sexual violence in this country have not been recognized as victims. Why? Big question. They also have a right. But the beginning, if you really want to unlock the experience of victims of what happened to them, survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, but others as well, you need to start by recognizing what happened. And in this country, there was a peace agreement, but no recognition.
Victims are not able to come forward as well.
Victims of conflict-related sexual violence faced additional barriers than other victims because of a stigma, ostracism. Once culturally speaking, this is a very difficult subject. So once
you have written Beyond Silence and Stigma, crafting gender-sensitive approach for the victims of sexual violence in domestic reparation
programs. And there are interesting responses internationally about how to craft transitional justice measures that allow victims of conflict-related sexual violence to come forward. And if you allow me to say, I'm now working for an amazing institution called the Global Survivors Fund that was set up by two Nobel Peace Prize winners.
What does it do?
It enables access to reparations for victims of conflict-related sexual violence. And my dream is that the fund will be able to contribute to this process in Nepal of moving forward reparation for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, but also for others, because I see the opportunity here to think about transitional justice and about a domestic reparation program, for example. Again, let me repeat this. In Nepal, the amount of victims you have makes feasible to provide justice, truth, and reparation. It's not like in other countries of the world. Think about Syria and the amount of victims we have there, or Colombia. It's not the same, it's not comparable. And when I look at this country, I've been in countries like the Central African Republic where where you have to start thinking, my God, how can you do it here? Because there are no conditions, enabling conditions. Here in Nepal, what I see are plenty of the enabling conditions that are needed to be able to fulfill these rights. What you need is the will to make it happen. So you might not be the richest country, but you have amazing potential and the ability to gather the resources, human, financial, etc., to make it possible. Yes, we can get the international community to contribute. And I think this is also a message I want to send. Many of the states that in the past were supporting the work here in Nepal on transitional justice somehow felt that this was already over or maybe lost faith. We need to understand that transitions take time, and we cannot just leave before the transition, the key elements of the transition have been accomplished. And here, we are not there yet. No? So we need the support. We need the support of the international community.
You see Colombia as an example?
Yes, totally. Yeah.
So what was the real experience of Colombia? What happened there? How did it come to conclusion?
Well, I don't think we have come to we are still doing it.
Yes.
But I see, as I said,
it is in process of conclusion.
It is in the process of happening. And we need to keep an eye there to make sure that it is effective. Because my worry, I think that what has happened so far in terms of the framework, the dialogues, the participation has been great. Now, the system, the transitional justice system that was put in place, the special jurisdiction for peace, the Truth Commission that already delivered its report just a few months ago, the Commission on Enforced Disappearances, the domestic reparation program. What we need is this system to show the results. And we are beginning to see some fascinating things. One of the key lessons, again, participation. This system is built under the idea of participation, but also on the idea that you cannot achieve justice without reparation, without truth, without non-recurrence. So I think these are intrinsically connected rights. And I invite here people in Nepal to think about those connections, because justice, well, to me, justice is a form of reparation in itself, but you cannot achieve justice without the other elements, no? And also because these are so fragile mechanisms and so fragile rights, you need to ensure, I think that the best response we can give to victims who were harmed is precisely to try and fulfill as much as we can of each of those rights. That's what is going to give them the highest possible experience of justice, comprehensive justice, not criminal justice, but comprehensive justice, and would allow them to move forward.
Do you see this process in Nepal is also in right way right now, or it has derailed?
I think that you are stagnated. I think you're in a limbo. I don't get a sense of direction here at the moment. I think we need direction. We need clarity about where this is going to go, and we need accountability, not only in the criminal sense, but we need to bring to account those that promise through a peace agreement here that there would be justice, that there would be truth, that there would be, reparation, etc.
So what do you see forward from this stagnated situation?
Again, we need to bring those to the table, and we need to dialogue.
So you are hopeful about this in Nepal?
I see the opportunities. I see, look, I'm going to leave Nepal thinking that there are conditions here that I don't see in other countries that could allow a transitional justice process to be successful, or as successful as a transitional justice process could be. First. Second, the amount of victims you have in this country, hard, of course, very difficult. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's not comparable to what I see in other countries where the massivity of victims already make it incredibly challenged to deliver on those rights. I see that. But I also see here, even if they are not united at the moment, key elements of that ecosystem that if they get together can make a transition quite fascinating in this country. So I see fascinating civil society organizations. I don't want to mention names, but I am impressed with the work of some of those organizations, not only within the human rights dimension, but also within the humanitarian. The work that people have done here to try to help those that have been less well off is impressive. And we need to take that into account. And we need to bring those to the table because they are going to contribute tremendously to the TJ process. That's another key message. Transitional justice is not only made by the government, it's made by different actors. How do we bring those that have been trying to bring justice through, say, humanitarian assistance and other means to the table to teach us what they've learned, no? To connect us to the victims. That needs to be done.
So in this hopeful note, your hopeful note, we'll end this talking today. Thanks for coming, and thanks for providing your knowledge, and hopefully it will contribute to our peace process.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really hope that I kept my hope, and that you deliver on transitional justice for victims.
Let's hope together.
Thank you.
आज हामीसँग हुनुहुन्थ्यो युनिभर्सिटी अफ एसेक्सका प्रोफेसर डाक्टर क्लारा स्यान्डोभल। यस्तै विभिन्न व्यक्तित्वलाई ल्याएर हामी तपाईहरुसँग कुराकानी गर्ने नै छौं। अहिलेलाई अन्तर्वार्ता यति नै। नमस्कार।